In the late 80s, a chap by the name of Robert Grebe figured out what I think is probably the best use of Laserdisc gaming, and by that I don't mean putting it in the bin. Some of you would disagree with me there. Hello cave dwellers, welcome into the cave. Today we're looking at a Laserdisc game, or it was a Laserdisc game originally, and that is a format that really did try, and in some cases did, seduce gamers in the early 80s. I'm talking about games like Astron Belt and Dragon's Lair. They were proving this as early as 1983. But for many players, one game was quite enough. The action amounted to little more than a memory game layered over video that forked or abruptly ended depending on your actions. Anyway, that's not to say that some of us aren't fond of some of these games, and I count myself in that list. Dragon's Lair, a case in point that makes me feel warm and fuzzy and nostalgic, and I just love that Don Bluth artwork. Don Bluth, famously an ex-Disney animator. I did read his autobiography recently, and he didn't dedicate more than 2 or 3 pages maximum to Dragon's Lair, so I don't think he has quite such a fondness for it himself. It sounds like it was a bit of a stopgap in his workload. But nevertheless, he made it, and I have to admit, as much as I love it, I did recognise its limitations very early on. Anyway, let's get back to Robert Grebe now. He recognised the limitations of this format, and he considered how they could be put to best use at the Institute for Combat Arms and Tactics, or ICAT. His mind wasn't on using laserdiscs for gaming per se, he was thinking about creating police training simulations. Inspired by already well-established light gun technology and combining it with laserdisc video playback, Robert could put officers through their paces at the police academy. Yes, Nintendo had released video-based shooting games back in the 70s, for example with Wild Gunman, but that was a 16mm film in which you draw your gun against an opponent in a shootout, and if you timed it wrong, a foul light would come on. This was much more of an electromechanical affair than we're talking about here with laserdiscs. It was the laserdisc format that defined this new style shooter, which was now being used to train SWAT teams. And before long, Robert took this new technology and put it into arcades under the company name American Laser Games. Now, the first I knew about this technology was in the early 90s, and it was at a bowling alley. We had an arcade at the back of our local bowling alley, and they seemed to be quite well funded. They had things like virtuality popped up there. I mean, that was £5 a turn. That was super expensive when that turned up. But also this game turned up there, Mad Dog McCree. It was a Western-themed shooter with a huge rear projection display and a pedestal to stand behind with your light gun. Now, I didn't know it at the time, but deep inside that cabinet was a Commodore Amiga 500 managing the game, and that would control a Laserdisc player, telling it what part of the video to jump to and when. It would also overlay the scores and game information using a genlock. The game did relatively well in North America and Japan, in part because it offered a gameplay experience that wouldn't really be easy to emulate in the home. You could play a really good version of Street Fighter II on your Super Nintendo in 1992, but a full-motion video light gun game, that was a pretty unique arcade experience unless you'd won the lottery. But in subsequent years, the game would make its way into our homes at last. I'd eventually get to play it at home in this very grainy MS-DOS version in 1993. I played it with my mouse instead of a light gun, and the first thing you'll notice is that the video quality is terrible. It's just almost unwatchable. These were the very early days of multimedia computing and CD-ROMs, and without a dedicated MPEG decoder chip to handle the video, compromises had to be made. And that brings us on to our tech nibble for today, because I knew there were better versions out there. I knew there was technology out there that was streaming better quality video. I knew there were light guns. It was just completely out of reach to me and my budget at home at the time. So today we're going to try out a couple of examples of that and see if they hold up against my arcade memories of Mad Dog McCree. It's that part of the episode where I say a big thank you to PCBWay.com for supporting the channel. If you're working on your own project and you need PCB manufacturing, 3D printing, CNC work and much more besides, then PCBWay.com is the place to go. And while you're there, make sure you check out their shared project section, which is just rammed full of projects to support vintage hardware. It's well worth a look. Thank you, PCBWay.com. First up on the table, I want to show you this, a gigantic and still sealed as new Philips CDI version of the game. This was kindly donated by Retrospecs, so please show your thanks by subscribing to his channel. And no, that's not me on the box. Now this version of the game retailed at around £55 or $60 US, which doesn't seem too bad really. And it says the CDI digital video cartridge is required, which I'm happy to say I do have here. I didn't realise it was nestled away in my CDI until I had a look at it for the purposes of making this video and was pleasantly surprised to find it tucked in there. So that was a nice bonus. Now according to CDI magazine, this would have cost me around £180 when it came out. And the big attraction, in fact its sole attraction, is that it gives us MPEG-1 video decoding. And that should really make a difference compared to the PC version which we saw earlier. A CDI movie disc has a resolution of 384 by 288 pixels, which is slightly better, only just, but slightly better than a VCD, a video CD. Concerning, however, is this logo on the back here, Air Mouse Technology. What? Isn't this just a light gun? Well, I looked up the patent number and the US Patent Office patent for my American friends describes this as an optical pointing device, which preferably uses an infrared light as a source and a camera as a detector. Why is my first question to that. This is the era of CRTs. There was no need to use anything less than a regular light gun. It seems like a very weird decision to make in the era of CRTs. It would bear some fruit later, or at least some similar patents that Philips had when they settled out of court with Nintendo over the Nintendo Wii controller. Now that wasn't specifically about the Air Mouse Technology patent here, but similar ones that they had. The other version we'll be looking at today involves this. This is the game gun. Not as cool a name as the CDI one, which is called the Peacekeeper, and it doesn't come bundled with the game. That would have cost us extra. This gun is for the 3DO console, which came out in 1993, so a couple of years later than the CDI, and a far more capable games machine. I don't think anyone's going to argue with me over that one. Thankfully, there's no mention of weird, quirky technology on this box. It's just a bog standard light gun by the looks of it that runs on a bog standard 3DO. American Laser Games had already expanded their arcade range, and they were offering support for 2 games with the game gun originally, and they promised 4 more on the box here, and they did all get released, and more beyond that as well. The idea for American Laser Games then was that you would buy the gun, you would buy into this ecosystem, and you would buy every game as it was released. Not a bad idea because you wanted to get the most out of your peripheral. We'll take a good look at the game gun a little bit later, but I want to start with the Peacekeeper and see how this thing performs. And just to give you a sense of scale, here it is next to a standard cassette tape. Pretty chunky there, and I'll bring in now a big box PC game. It is huge. I mean, that's not a small PC game, that is a Sierra adventure game. That's pretty chunky. This thing would have had a hell of a presence on the shelf in your video game shop. Until now, it has never been opened, so today it finally gets to fulfill its destiny. Look how lovely that is. That is a box fresh Peacekeeper ready to be enjoyed. We've also got the manual in there, and it's a pretty brief manual with about 1 million different languages in there, a page per language. There's the sealed game disc in there. Mad Dog has a parental guidance rating, PG. And if you're cursing me for opening this, then I have to say it really is the best thing for it, because A, these things need to be played, and B, so often we see cables left in boxes deteriorate, they react, they eat through the packaging, they eat through themselves, anything that's touching it. It really is best to get it out, wipe it down, and then repackage it so that it's not laying against anything else, any other cables, and it's not going to cause any damage. So I have no regrets about opening this. I think it is the best thing for it. And here is the IR receiver, which fills me with dread. I have very negative feelings towards this. Am I being too sensitive? This is sticky back Velcro that's included so that you can stick the sensor to your TV set. And then there's the gun itself, based on a Colt 45, which was indeed used to keep the peace in the Old West. So that's Somerset, Devon and Cornwall, the usual rabble-rousers. There are a couple of discrete buttons here. That's in addition to the trigger. One seems to be an on-off switch for the sensor box itself. And it feels pretty nice in the hand. The only thing that I'd call a bit odd is the very round trigger guard here. That looks a bit off and unusual. But then I don't expect many Colt 45s are blue with the word Phillips down the barrel, so I think we can let it slide. Masses of cable are very welcome, so we can sit back comfortably from the TV. Now, all CDI controllers seem to have huge cables, and there's good reason for that. It was designed to be part of your lounge multimedia entertainment setup, and you were expected to sit all the way back on your sofa. So every single controller was designed with that in mind. For comparison, is a Famicom joypad, and here's the CDI. Systems with very different use goals and therefore very different lead lengths. Back to our gun, staring down the barrel, we can see the business end here of our fancy channel changer. Now the manual advises us here where we should put the receiver. You can put it on the top, you can put it on the side, underneath at the front. Ideally on the top though. So let's set it up and we'll give it a go and see if this can deliver anything close to the Mad Dog McCree arcade experience. Yeehaw! I've got it all set up then in big chair with my 27-inch Sony broadcast monitor and the sensor on top. This will of course work on a modern display as there's no reliance on the CRT beam, it's just that sensor. So that's kind of an advantage to this old tech. Calibration is needed to get the gun honed in, and you can see once I've done that there's a crosshair in the menus, but that's removed once in the game. And let me give you my first impressions. They are, well, really actually rather good. The video quality on this thing is fantastic. I've never seen the game looking this good outside of arcades.
Taking over the town. The mayor and his daughter been taken hostage out to Mad Dog's hideout. The sheriff, he's locked up in jail. We're gonna have to get him.
The goal of the game is to save the mayor and his daughter from Mad Dog's hideout. And we do that by shooting nearly everything that moves. We also visit this guy a lot. That's the Undertaker. You'll see him many, many times. The good first impression, the good start, it doesn't last very long though, I'm afraid. You guessed what was coming. Despite persevering and despite getting a little bit better at the game with practice, I always felt that things weren't tuned in right. This is a light gun game made for a light gun, which in this case is hindered by the slight delays, the strange feeling introduced by using an infrared gun. And that's layered on top of an already naturally slightly frustrating game. For example, if you shoot someone and you clearly can see that you hit them, but you hit them a few frames too early, the game just ignores it and then they shoot you. That's the nature of the technology we're dealing with, of course, but it's very unforgiving, and it's made even more unforgiving by this IR light gun.
There's more inside!
That's not to say I didn't have fun. It's always very satisfying to get on a roll, to shoot your way through an entire scene and then move on to the next one. When it works well. But I was left frustrated a lot in this version of the game. And I know this is going to sound really terrible of me. I'm afraid I had just as much fun, if not more, playing this game with a joypad. With a joypad and crosshairs on the screen. I'm sorry. I found that I was able to be more accurate, to get further into the game. I could even win the quick draw shootout scenes better using a joypad. And I think that tells you an awful lot about the quality of the Peacekeeper gun experience. It's such a shame because that video quality is so nice too. Now the game was later re-released. Well, many of American Laserdisc games are re-released, but it was also re-released for the Nintendo Wii at a later date. And I have played it on that, and it's very reminiscent of this experience with the Wiimote that tucks into a little plastic gun holder to mimic a light gun, but it's not a light gun, of course. And it feels just like it feels on this version. But Nintendo had good reason to do that. LCD TVs were standard at the time then. Again, I just maintain there was no reason for Philips to be using this technology at the time. The CDI Peacemaker then, I'm afraid, gets a thumbs down from me. The game with a joypad, worth a go, but I did quite enjoy using that air mouse technology to shoot play on the CD player in the CDI. It works quite well when no one's shooting back at you. I have much higher hopes then for the game gun here. Now, if a CDI can deliver that quality of a Mad Dog port, then the 3DO can easily match it, right? This time with a proper light gun. This gun came in 1 or 2 player versions, the latter having a Y splitter cable for the second gun to plug into. It's very similar to the Peacekeeper, but everything's a bit chunkier. Really, really nice gun to hold. And if you were to ask me if I feel lucky holding this, then I'd say yes, good sir. I do indeed feel lucky and a punk. Good day. It wasn't a 3DO exclusive either. This was released for the 3DO, the Sega CD, and later it did get a PC release. It was priced between $45 and $55 according to the included leaflet. Now what's interesting is that as American Laser Games developed more arcades, they moved from an Amiga and a Laserdisc platform to a 3DO in their cabinets. So with some of the later games, you're playing on arcade perfect hardware. It was a 3DO. You should be able to get the exact same experience at home. It wasn't plain sailing for them though, because it turned out that 3DOs were quite unsuited to be running all day long in an arcade cabinet, and reliability issues caused great frustration for arcade owners. You should have stuck with the Amiga 500, guys. Looking down the barrel of this gun, we can see that it's a classic light gun. No fancy air mice here, thank you very much. So let's plug it in and give it a go. As the game kicks off, it's all very familiar once again. It is indeed Mad Dog McCree, albeit with a slightly different and a slightly wispier, dare I say it, sexier intro. Despite its annoyances, the air mouse system did have one advantage. The screen didn't flash to help detect where the gun is aimed like a traditional light gun does. There's lots of flashing in the 3DO version, but in its defense, you can shoot off the screen to reload in this version, whereas in the CDI you had to shoot the bullets at the bottom left corner of the screen, which was a bit fiddly at times. The big surprise for me though on the 3DO is the video quality. It is not good at all. It's not as bad as the PC, nothing could be as bad as that, but considering the power of the console, I'd really hoped for better. Now, like the CDI, an MPEG module was available for the 3DO, but that was used purely for VCD playback. Not a single game required it in the console's library. I think we've all experienced videos with compression artifacts on our PCs, our PlayStations and other 90s devices, and it's easy to forget that the 3DO is still in that era where it could have really used a helping hand in the form of a dedicated MPEG decoder in these circumstances. However, why raise the barrier for entry? The goal here was to sell as many games as possible, so I'm afraid you're going to get artifacting and you're going to just have to deal with it. Back to the positives though. The light gun works as a light gun should. You point, you shoot, it registers the shot exactly how it should, and it makes for a far nicer gaming experience. I definitely managed to get further in the 3DO version of the game than I ever could in the CDI. For 3DO owners at the time, the game Mad Dog actually got released sooner than the gun, so they were playing it for a while. The early adopters certainly were playing it for a while with a joypad before they could get their hands on the gun.
The map to the hideouts in the mine, but you've got to talk to the prospector first.
On balance then, the game gun makes for a more enjoyable, more accurate, more playable experience, as playable as a Laserdisc game can be. The CDI has the wonderful visuals, and if we could just find a way of smashing the two together, either using those visuals on the 3DO or that light gun on the CDI, we would have the perfect, arcade-perfect version of Mad Dog McCree. It just falls short on both platforms. I've been wanting to open this up for a long time and to try this out as well. So it's been really nice to try them out in today's Tech Nibble and share with you my experience of them. Would I recommend you get either of these for your collection? Well, if it's for the purpose of playing, probably not. I mean, the game gun, yeah, there's more games that you can play on that one. This one you can use as a mouse, so games that support a mouse in the CDI, you can wave your gun around and play it like that, I suppose. So probably the game gun I would recommend over the Peacekeeper. But honestly, I wouldn't really recommend either of them for gaming. If you're a collector that wants to put them on your shelf for completeness, then sure, go ahead. You will find this one a lot easier to get hold of. and this one quite expensive. I'm still looking out for a PC version, because if I can find a PC version of this, then I can happily hook my PC up to a CRT, slightly older PC, and run some emulators like the Daphne or the Singe emulator, which emulates those Laserdisc games. And there are versions of those emulators which will actually use footage from a ripped Laserdisc or from the later DVD releases of these games. So you can get an even higher quality video experience of Mad Dog and other games on your PC, play it with a light gun. But like I say, they very, very rarely come up. So I'll have a saved search on eBay looking for that, and hopefully I can stomach the cost when it does turn up. Or of course, you can just go all in with a modern setup and use the Sinden light gun. I think that's still the best one out there, and enjoy light gun games that way too. And I have to admit, when all is said and done, and I've tried this and I've tried these CDI and the 3DO and all these fancy systems that I didn't have back in the day, it was the PC version I went back to today with my mouse, with the terrible video, and that was the one that I managed to play all the way through to the end. It's not a very long game at all. Once you've memorized all the positions, it is a very quick game to play through. No more than about 3 or 4 minutes to complete the game. And there it is, I completed it. I shot all of the pixels that looked like cowboys. I didn't shoot the pixels that didn't look like cowboys. Very hard to differentiate. And we got to the end of the game. Didn't really feel like the great achievement it should have done. It would have felt better holding a gun. Anyway, take care. I hope you enjoyed today's Tech Nibble. Do come to the cave and try them out for yourself. Head to retrocollective.co.uk to book a ticket to come and visit. Check out my merch shop there if you want to get yourself a mug or a t-shirt or some other bits and bobs to support the museum. And I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.